Good day and welcome to Living Well in Montana. This is a program of LIFTT, Living Independently for Today and Tomorrow. And LIFTT is an organization that serves disabled Montanans in 18 counties in southeastern Montana. And it's one of the 4 centers in Montana to promote independent living throughout the state. Kathleen?
I'm here with my guest, co-host, Corby Skinner. I'm Kathleen Benoit, and we are delighted today to introduce Andy Fox, who is the new chairman of the LIFTT board. And we have been having some good conversations, and we just want to learn more about you, Andy, and just kind of give us a background before we start talking about LIFTT board meetings. Talk about yourself a little bit.
Okay. I became disabled in 1989 in a single car accident in Wyoming, a rollover accident where I was ejected. Broke a lot of things, but the most important, I broke my back at T11-12. So I'm an incomplete T11-12 spinal cord injury. Happened when I was 18, between my junior and senior year of high school. I was lucky enough, though, after the accident to get to be flown to Denver for some surgeries to put me back together, number one. But number two, Craig Hospital is in Denver, and they're one of the best rehab hospitals in the country for spinal cord injury. So I was lucky enough to attend their rehabilitation, and they taught me a lot of things about not only self-care but sports and being active and staying active as you possibly can to hopefully, just make your life better.
You were 18 years old.
18, yeah.
And when we talked on the phone yesterday, you talked a little bit, well, not a little bit, you were passionate about sports.
Yeah.
So just kind of tick off some of the sports you're involved in.
Okay. So when I was at Craig Hospital, after I got well enough, they introduced me to water skiing. After my stint at Craig Hospital.
Wait a minute. Did you say water skiing?
Yes.
Okay.
What?
We got to stop right there and explain how on earth do you water ski?
So it's probably not quite as large as a ski that you would water ski on. I mean, how do I want to say it?
Waterboards?
Like out in the ocean when you ride the waves.
Like a surfboard.
It's not quite as big as a surfboard, but it's pretty close.
Huh.
And they put a cage on top of it, basically, where a person slips their hips through the cage and sits on the board, and then you have your legs out in front of you bent,
wow.
And your feet slide into a rubber receptacle that holds your feet in place. And then they have a notch at the end of the board, and you take the ski rope with a ball on it, you put the ball on that notch, and so when you're ready to go, you signal you're ready to go, and the boat takes off and it pops you up, and then you're able to maneuver yourself. I loved it. I loved it, yeah. I wasn't up long the first time, but the more I did it, the more I was up, and I loved it. It was a huge sense of freedom that was missing for a while.
Well, being that age and having an accident, one, you're lucky to be alive.
Yes.
Right.
Was that an issue? Were they concerned about whether you would survive the accident?
Yeah. It was a rough experience. My family was here in Montana, and I was there. I was actually on my way to Texas to do road construction with a buddy of mine that had just recently moved down there. And so I was away from my family when it happened. And yeah, there was definite concern. They called, I was in Casper, Wyoming, the very first hospital, and they called my mother, got her on the phone, said, if you want to talk to your son, we're going to fly him to Denver, and we're not positive how this is going to turn out. So,
Wow.
yeah, it was a rough little go.
You know, the interesting thing about LIFTT is when people think about disabilities, some people are born with disabilities. Some people have an accident. Some people are born blind. Some people go blind. Do you know, I'm just wondering, what's the percentage of clients that LIFTT have that have been impaired by an accident?
Actually, I'm not sure about that.
We've asked that question before, and it's about 30%.
Of people that have had an accident and become disabled.
I think that's correct. But that's a good question, because there are and then there are the hidden disabilities, the angst, panic attacks. There's all kinds.
Crohn's disease or
Exactly.
something similar
Exactly.
to that, yeah.
Learning disabilities. So there are more people with disabilities than I think people realize. They are everywhere, and organizations like LIFTT, their main purpose is to reach out and help them. And that happened with you. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's
Yep.
how you became involved?
I actually got involved and got to know about LIFTT in about 2005 probably. I ended up tearing my rotator cuff while I was downhill snow skiing, and had to have it repaired.
I tell you, he works this into every answer, because there are
Water
more.
ski and then snow skate. So it sounds like you have not done whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah. No,
Well, can you throw in the semi-pro basketball?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when I first got hurt in 1990, they had a group of guys that were organized here in town playing basketball at Eastern Montana College. And Eastern Montana College actually sponsored the team, and we had jerseys, and we played regionally around here. And so I went to college there until 1995. We played basketball there. And then I was working for the Bureau of Reclamation at the time, starting in 1990, in a stay-in-school program where they basically helped pay part of my tuition as I went to college, and then I promised to work with them for a time after that. Little did I know it would be 27 years, but so my first duty station with the Bureau of Reclamation was in Oklahoma City after the bombing in '95.
Wow.
And so I went down there, and they had another organized team there that played for the Paralyzed Veterans of America. They called themselves the Okie Spokesmen. And they were a semi-pro team that played against like the Dallas Rolling Cowboys and the Arkansas Razorbacks, and it was in the Arkansas Valley District. I played there with them for another 5 years.
Wow.
Came home in 2000, played probably another 10 years around here. Yeah, so played some basketball, water skiing, snow skiing. I road raced. I won a 10K in Oklahoma.
And are you still very active?
I try to be. Yeah, I still get out and walk, or I don't walk, but I roll 4 or 5 miles a day usually, trying to stay active. We haven't played basketball in quite some time. It'd be kind of neat to get that started up again, but
Well, you would have to field a team too.
right.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's, one of the issues. I'm sure in larger cities there's a lot more people with disabilities
Yes.
that are interested in basketball.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
back to our question about how did you get involved with LIFTT?
Yeah. Okay, so I tore my rotator cuff, and at the time, LIFTT had a program where they would borrow out equipment, and in order to keep me working and doing as much as I could with one arm, basically. They set me up with an electric wheelchair, and I was able to use that for 2 months while my rotator cuff healed and I could get back on my feet. And so yeah, no, it was a godsend to keep me working and keep me active and keep my mind going while recovering. And so it always struck me. I mean, I've always known about LIFTT ever since then and the services they provide.
So one of the main reasons that we have LIFTT is, and I don't know exactly when it started in terms of federal support for it, but the idea is that if we can get disabled people to live independently with various equipments or house modifications or whatever, it's really not only cheaper, but it's more fulfilling for the person.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I was, like I said, lucky enough to get my rehab through Craig Hospital, and that's what they always pushed was that, you know, I mean, the more you can do, the more active that you can stay, the more full your life is going to be, and dealing with your disability is going to be, you know, much easier. And I've been lucky enough to be, you know, fully independent with living on my own and having my own home, and I figured out how to do my own yard work, and I drive my own vehicles and all different kind of stuff. I'm involved in all different kind of sports, and I drag race. So staying active is key to having a full and satisfying life.
Right. That's true for anybody.
Yes.
Whether they have a disability or not.
Yeah.
I think, you know, it's so admirable. What was it like? When did you figure out that you could have your own home? After your accident, what did you do? Did you live with your family or?
Yes. Yep, I did. I stayed, I think it was probably about the first year and a half. I was still staying at home. That would have been 2.5 years because it was a year and a half into college probably. I stayed at home. My mother was there. My sister came back to the house. My brothers came around and were active in keeping me active, keeping me moving in the right direction. And I had my older brother as a roommate for a little while, probably another year after that. But then I think probably 2004, I got my own place. Yeah, I got my own place. I lived on my own, and
You know, and you had a lot of support, it sounds like.
yeah.
And what's heartbreaking is during the pandemic, there were a lot of disabled people that were alone. I mean, they couldn't go out. They couldn't socialize, and that's where I've seen LIFTT really come in. It's not called LIFTT for nothing.
Right.
I mean, they're lifting people out of a funk almost.
Yeah.
The staff and the board has worked very hard to overcome the challenges of the pandemic, and as you know, virtual programming, Zoom sessions, virtual celebrations, and it is bringing people together, because it is sad that there are so many people who are alone and maybe don't even know about LIFTT.
Right.
And that's what. How did you reach out during the pandemic? Was it?
Well, I think that Carlos and everybody,
The director.
the director, yes, had to make quite an adjustment. I mean, I know that is still a conversation piece, and that I think that there are still people that cannot wait to be more hands-on about this. But yes, no, they're creating a website that is going to help with that as well. Fully accessible website that will hopefully reach a lot of people. But yeah, I think their main customer base, I mean, they just picked up the phone and they worked very hard at still staying in touch.
You know, one of the other things that I think is interesting that LIFTT can do, that has to do with accessibility. And there are some people that have problems hearing or seeing, so the website will be ADA compliant, which makes it very complicated. But I am thinking LIFTT also helps people like you that are in a wheelchair modify their homes or their cars, and also they can help businesses
Correct. Yeah.
do modifications for ADA compliance.
Yes. Yep, that's correct. I mean, and as far as that stuff goes, I mean, removing any barriers to allowing people to be self-sufficient and active as possible is, I mean...
I think one example is the Echo Dot, Alexa. And Carlos worked that program to get the Echo Dots at cost. And it changed the lives of many of the almost shut-ins, because they could talk to Alexa. They could say, read me a book, tell me a joke, what's the recipe for chicken pot pie?
Right.
You know, and it's
Alexa
truly...
knows the recipe for a chicken pie.
Ask. I don't know. I don't want to answer that question.
So LIFTT is not the police. They're not the ADA police.
Right.
So if a business is concerned about modifications or making improvements, LIFTT can make recommendations about, they're not going to do it, but they know the contractors they can refer them to help them make ADA compliance.
Correct. Yep.
Have you seen, in terms of living in Billings, more compliance in terms of sidewalks and buses and that sort of thing?
Drinking fountains and
Yeah, I mean, there's always still room for improvement, but yes, I mean, over the years, absolutely. I remember back in 1990 when I was working downtown, if I were going to lunch anywhere in the downtown area, a lot of times I was jumping at least 2 or 3 curbs to get to any kind of restaurant, you know.
Jumping, you mean by backing up and flipping your front wheels?
Usually I go off front in a wheelie and then I'll hit a curb in a wheelie and pop over it in order to...
Yet another sport.
It sounds dangerous.
I've fallen a couple of times downtown, actually, but you know, you look at downtown here now, I mean, you can hear the noises for the blind when
For crossing the street.
and most of the sidewalks have curb cuts now.
That's great.
A lot of the businesses now don't have steps that you have to manage in order to get into them. A lot of them are. So I've seen a lot of changes in Billings.
If you're just joining us, this is the Living Independently for Today and Tomorrow, LIFTT program, a part of Living Well in Montana. Our guest is Andy Fox, who is the president of the LIFTT Board of Directors. Fascinating stories, and I just have to ask you if were you on the board of directors before you became the chairman
chair
of the board?
Yes.
And how long did you serve on the board?
I was on the board, I think I've been on the board for about 6-7 months now, and I was on the board for a couple of months probably before we voted for a new chair, and I was voted the chair and
Congratulations.
decided to get involved.
It's interesting, if people don't know, that a lot of the employees and a lot of the board members are people with disabilities.
Yes.
And I think that's important.
I think it is too. It's
It has to be over half by the bylaws, yes.
oh, okay. That's good to know.
Yep. And I think it's really important too, because I think that even if you have a disability, fully understanding what people need as far as becoming or being the best they can be with their disability. I mean, it takes a whole group of people to understand. I mean, I might have a full understanding of paraplegic. I think I probably do, but even paralysis, each injury is different. Everybody has different needs. There may have been other injuries besides the paralysis, that kind of stuff. So I think it's really important to keep that balance of disabled people on the board and involved with LIFTT, because it helps them understand all of the disabilities that they are trying to provide services for out there, and more, help the community fully.
Since we've been having our staff meetings, weekly staff meetings, it's interesting because within the staff we have people that are deaf, people that are blind, and Carlos is always like telling somebody, look up, because they'll be looking down
He's reading
and
lips.
talking, and he can't read lips, and he's very good at reading lips.
Really good.
But if you're like this...
When Corby and I interviewed to work with LIFTT, we met him in person because it was before the pandemic, and we didn't know he had a disability. We met with him, he interviewed us, and then called us and offered us the position. And I think it was then that he said, oh, by the way, I'm deaf and partially blind.
Yeah.
Oh. It's incredible.
It is exceptional. I mean, how especially, I wasn't much exposed to the deaf or the blind previously to him, and it is exceptional to see the adjustment that people can make.
Right. And some people have mental and emotional disabilities. Everything from attention deficit disorders to high-level depressions or panic attacks. Those are all disabilities. So it's not really just physical. It could be a variety of disabilities.
Right, and it's our hope through Community Channel 7 that we are reaching out to people that aren't familiar with the possibilities that LIFTT offers and the services, and they bend over backwards to accommodate their consumers and their peers, and it's truly extraordinary. As the president, Andy, what is the path for LIFTT that you're hoping to see? What are you working on?
Well, so they're pretty well established here in Billings. However, I don't think a lot of people know much about LIFTT. So, I'd really like to see LIFTT, when I talk to people, I'd really like them to know something about LIFTT, because it's such a great, positive organization that does tremendous things for the community. And, working with you guys to help make that happen, get their organization name out there is great. Now, they are pretty well established in Billings. However, there's a lot of other counties out there that
18 counties.
Right. And we do have an office in Glendive now with a presence over there, but I would really like to see LIFTT be, serve people in every one of those counties, be capable of doing that. And
so this program really just runs in Yellowstone County, the Billings area, but we are making all of these programs available that will then be on the website so people can watch these programs. The COVID-19 made it really interesting for disabled people.
Yes.
LIFTT normally had an office where people go and they could take art classes, they could meet with their counselors.
Yes.
So one of the things I think why Kathleen and I became involved is how do we serve all of those people when we can't physically be with them?
right. Yeah.
And we're still learning, but it is working. It's such an enthusiastic organization and filled with ideas and talent, and I think that I would like to think that eventually more and more counties will have access to these programs and to the accessible website that is being built. So I think the technology is going to make a huge difference in that success.
I agree.
Do you know how well they serve the reservations, the Crow and Cheyenne Reservation?
You know, I think that we have people that are reaching out to LIFTT a little bit, but they don't have a presence there yet. I mean, I think that it's in the works right now for us to have discussions with folks on the reservation, and by folks I mean by leadership. And hopefully we can create some sort of office to help them manage their disabled population.
Yeah, they can access the Billings office, but I do know having a person in your town or in your community that could serve as...
This makes all the difference.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
We are just about out of time, but I know that you wanted to talk a little bit about encouraging listeners and viewers to consider volunteering for LIFTT, or they are looking for board members as well.
Yes, actually, we are always looking for board members. It is a volunteer position to be on the board, but it's a very important role that needs to be filled so that we can keep LIFTT going in the right direction, and help brainstorm ideas that will help LIFTT become the best organization that it can be.
So those volunteer board members could have a disability, or they could be a parent of somebody with a disability,
Right.
or they could just be a community volunteer, really.
Correct.
So
Correct.
consider that.
Yep.
We are just about out of time, and I want to thank Andy Fox, the Board of Directors President of LIFTT, for a great interview. I'm Kathleen Benoit, Corby Skinner, and this has been Living Well in Montana. We'll see you again.